A 25-year-old young woman was already carrying the weight of the entire world on her shoulders when this incident happened. She had recently lost her grandfather, the man who had essentially raised her from childhood because her father was never present in her life. And the grief she was feeling was not just the ordinary sadness that comes with losing an elderly relative. It was the kind of deep, soul-crushing loss that makes you feel like the ground has been pulled out from under your feet. Because this man was not just her grandfather, he was her father figure, her protector, her safe place, and losing him meant losing a piece of her identity and her sense of security in this world. On top of that grief, she had been silently battling severe depression and anxiety ever since she and her boyfriend had made the incredibly difficult and emotionally devastating decision to terminate a pregnancy back in August, a decision that, no matter how mutual it was, leaves a mark on a woman that does not simply disappear with time, and she had been carrying that emotional burden largely on her own while still trying to show up for her relationship, for her business, and for her daily life. She was also in the middle of building her own business from scratch, which anyone who has ever tried to do knows is one of the most mentally and emotionally exhausting things a person can take on, and the stress of that alone had been so overwhelming that she had not been able to finish a single full meal in weeks and woke up every single morning with a wave of anxiety hitting her before she even had a chance to open her eyes properly. So when her boyfriend, a 35-year-old semi-professional athlete who traveled to different states and countries every single weekend to compete in tournaments, suggested that she come along with him on one of his trips to get a change of scenery and hopefully give her grieving mind a little bit of breathing room, she thought it sounded like a good idea, a small escape, a chance to feel a little less alone in everything she was going through, and she agreed to go with him on what was supposed to be a simple, straightforward domestic flight. The trip there went smoothly enough, and for a brief moment it probably felt like maybe this had been the right call, maybe a little time away was exactly what she needed. But the real problem revealed itself when it was time to fly back home. At the departure gate, airport security stopped her and refused to let her through because the name on her boarding pass did not match the name on her government-issued ID. The situation was this: she is Asian, and like many Asians living in or traveling through countries where English is dominant, she had an English name that she went by casually, a nickname of sorts, but her official registered name, the one on her passport and ID, was her Asian name. This was not a complicated or unknown fact. She and her boyfriend had actually discussed this very issue before, so it was not as if he had no idea this distinction existed. Yet when he booked her flight ticket, he used her English nickname instead of her official legal name, a simple but consequential mistake that was entirely his doing, and now she was stranded on the wrong side of airport security with no way to board her flight home. She went to the airline to see if anything could be done, but they told her there was nothing they could do at that point because all passenger information had already been submitted. She was stuck, and the only solution was to buy a new ticket for the next available flight and wait at the airport alone until that flight departed. Now here is where the story takes a turn that reveals a great deal about the kind of man her boyfriend truly was. When faced with this situation, his girlfriend, who was already emotionally fragile from grief, depression, and anxiety, and weeks of barely eating or sleeping, now stranded at an airport because of his mistake, he made the decision to leave. Not to stay with her, not to reschedule whatever appointment he had and take the next flight back together, not to sit beside her and make sure she was okay, but to simply board his original flight and go. He told her to wait at the airport alone for 4.5 hours and said he would pay for her new ticket since it was his fault, as if throwing money at the problem absolved him of any responsibility to actually be present for the person he claimed to love. And the most revealing detail of all is this: the new ticket cost $50. $50. This is a man who had literally just spent $250 the night before playing a single evening of poker, a man who plays poker every single night, a man who thinks nothing of spending $2,000 in one night at a casino, a man whose annual income she was well aware of and which made $50 essentially meaningless. Buying 2 new tickets so that neither of them had to be alone would have cost him the equivalent of one hand of cards. And he chose not to do it. But it was not even really about the money, and somewhere deep down she probably knew that. It was about what his choice communicated, that his schedule, his comfort, his convenience mattered more than her emotional and mental well-being in that moment. When she began to visibly fall apart, when she could feel a full panic attack rising in her chest and her breathing started to go, he did not hold her hand or tell her it was going to be okay, or offer her any comfort whatsoever. Instead, he told her to stop looking like she was about to cry because it was making him feel bad. Let that sink in for a moment. She was on the verge of a panic attack in a crowded airport, grieving, exhausted, anxious, alone, and his primary concern was that her visible distress was making him uncomfortable. She told him to just go, not because she meant it, not because she was truly okay with being left, but because she was so conditioned to managing his emotions and putting his comfort first that even in one of her worst moments she could not bring herself to ask him to stay and risk making him feel worse. So he left. He got on the plane and he left her there. After he landed, instead of calling to check if she was okay, or expressing any genuine remorse for leaving her, he sent her voice messages telling her not to overreact, saying he did not understand why she was acting the way she was, and, most extraordinarily, telling her that she needed to have more empathy for him. He was asking the woman he had just abandoned at an airport, while she was grieving and spiraling, to have empathy for him. She chose not to respond, not out of pettiness, but out of sheer survival instinct, because she knew that if she opened that door she would spend whatever emotional energy she had left trying to soothe him, and she simply had nothing left to give. Her best friend, who lived nearby, called her and talked her through the panic, helped her breathe, helped her think clearly enough to book her new ticket, and then her flight got delayed by another 4 hours, meaning she sat in that airport for the better part of a day, alone, reading through the responses of strangers on the internet who were doing more to make her feel seen and heard than her boyfriend of a year and a half had done in recent memory. While sitting there, she began to reflect on things she had pushed to the back of her mind or made excuses for over the course of their relationship. She remembered how, in the days when her grandfather was in the hospital and she was living in the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing when he would pass, her boyfriend had texted her one night to tell her that she did not care about him because she had gone 6 hours without calling him back. 6 hours, while she was sitting with the grief of a dying grandfather. She thought about her birthday in February and something that had happened then that had already made her start quietly considering whether this relationship was sustainable. She realized she had a pattern of forgetting the bad things he did, of getting swept up in the good moments and letting the painful ones fade, and she had actually started texting herself notes every time something hurtful happened, just so she would not forget, just so she could not gaslight herself into thinking things were fine when they were not. The age gap between them, which she had never thought much about before, started to look different to her through the lens of all these incidents, the way he consistently made his feelings the priority, the way he expected her to manage his emotional reactions even when she was the one who was hurting, the way he framed her reasonable emotional responses as overreactions while never once questioning his own behavior. When she finally got home that night, she was exhausted in every possible way a person can be exhausted. She had been through enough for one day and all she wanted was some peace. But instead of being welcomed home with any warmth or acknowledgement of what she had been through, he immediately confronted her about the fact that she had not been responding to his calls and messages, acting as though her silence was the offense that needed to be addressed, as though she owed him a response while she was sitting alone in an airport having a panic attack because he had left her there. He kept pushing and pushing, refusing to let it go, asking her if she thought what she had done was normal, and something in her finally snapped. She yelled back. She told him everything, about her birthday, about her grandfather, about the funeral, about every moment she had needed him, and he had made it about himself. When she finally screamed that it was over, he responded not with remorse but with justification, and when she broke down crying and told him through tears that she had needed him that day and he had left her, his response was quiet and simple and somehow the most damning thing he could have said. He said, "You told me to go." As if that settled it. as if he genuinely did not understand, or did not want to understand, that she had said those words not freely, but because she had spent so long prioritizing his comfort over her own needs that she could not even ask him to stay when she was falling apart. She packed a bag, made her way to her best friend's place down the road, and left behind a relationship that had been slowly taking more from her than it was ever giving back.